Susan Stone, what a name. Hey, welcome to The Necessary Entrepreneur. And I don't highlight The Necessary Entrepreneur often because I'm like, hey, this isn't about the name of our podcast. It's about the people. It's about our shared experiences, you and me. But what about, so you run this company now, operate with other people, called Ubiquitous Energy.
That's right.
Is that correct?
That's right. That's correct.
Okay. And so, but your background comes from finance and VC.
Correct.
With what comes to me with also like an East Coast education. And now you're on the West Coast in California. So I'm looking here, I'm like, how in the world did Susan end up leading this solar company? And I think about us being in the Midwest. I'm like, okay, inform us today about energy, about the evolution of solar, because personally, on one of the office buildings that I own, my utility bills, they're very expensive. Nobody wants to hear how much they are. But my utility bills, just like everyone else's, they more than doubled over the past 36 months. And that directly affects my bottom line, the operations. And I'm like, man, what in the world can I do to affect this? So I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot about that today. But you're also, I think, going to share a ton about your journey from not so distant past of a Yale and a Georgetown education and being in the finance and VC world to sitting here running a solar company and living in Northern California. What in the world do we need to know about Susan and energy and entrepreneurship? What in the world is going on with this stuff?
I said, that's a nice big open question.
Right? I think just conversation. So it's like, hey, share with us what you know, because me personally and selfishly, I need to know more about this subject. And then I want to know a lot about you and how you found yourself here.
Well, that sounds great. I'm happy to share as much as I can.
Okay, let's go. So, how'd you find yourself running this energy company?
Oh, it was a long and twisting journey. No, really, like most things, it was a little bit just being in the right place at the right time. So, a lot of luck and serendipity. I originally met this company and our founders in 2013. So end of 2013, almost 10 years ago, and saw it was something incredible when I first met them. And I guess that kind of, I'll fast forward all the way to the end, which is I still wake up every day in awe of our technology and what it can do. And so you can imagine the moment when I met our founders and saw transparent solar for the first time. I was an investor at the time, looking for, opportunities to invest in climate tech. We called it clean tech back then. So if there are investors listening, they'll recognize that. We used to, that was the last generation. Now we call it climate tech. And I saw these tiny little solar cells. They were like the size of a postage stamp, and you could see through them, and they made power. And that was how early this company was. These guys had proven that they could make solar you could see through. And then they had done this really cool mock-up where they had tiled together a bunch of these solar cells and retrofit a Kindle so that, if you snapped this extra screen on top of it, you never needed to charge it. And that's what sold me immediately. So we invested in the company, the firm I was working with, we invested in the company in 2014. And I joined the board at that time and really started working closely with our co-founder, who's now our chief technology officer. He was our CEO at the time. And we just really connected and started building the business together. From me as my seat as a director, he was really operating the company. And it advanced to the moment about 4 years ago where it was really time to commercialize this technology in earnest. And our co-founder and CTO, Miles, is a brilliant person, and he's very talented. And he was kind of doing it alone. He was leading the team alone. And so we decided it was time to buddy up. I came in to really focus on the business side, growing our partnerships, growing our marketing team, really productizing this technology. And Miles' focus is on advancing the technology. How do we get it manufactured? And a lot of overlap on product and on, kind of how we talk about the technology. So it was just really, I think, longevity of relationships. I think that really was the key to coming in. We knew we worked well together. Our board wanted us to have, really two voices in the leadership roles, and I was available. I had to give up some other things, so it was a tough decision to focus, but it was a good one.
So when you're making that decision, you participated in funding in 2013, and then you start coming in and spending more time with Miles. How do you make that decision to give up on that, what I'm assuming, much more of the VC investment side, and coming in to operate the business?
Yeah.
How do you make the decision? Is it total belief? Is it where you're at in your life? Like, what is this?
For me, it was mostly belief, because look, this is a little bit of a secret about VCs. It can be a little bit of a cushy lifestyle. You, for the most part, you make your own schedule. You get to be inundated with ideas from brilliant people. My brain just loves that, meeting different people, working on different things. And I was in complete control of, or nearly complete control of, my own time and how I spent it. And I was building my own VC firm at the time that I decided to come in at Ubiquitous. That was a big give for me. And that was the thing I was the most worried about. I remember telling my husband at the time, like, oh, wow, this is really scary. Like, there are going to be people who expect me to be available and, on the job at every moment in time. And this is a big change for me. But I'm such a believer in this technology and in the impact that we can have with it. And I think, now you can't ignore climate change and the movement, to combat that. In 2019, when I came in, that was just starting to become super mainstream. And so it was a combination of like, look, this is how I can make a huge impact. And this technology it's too good to not flourish. And I want to
come back to that. I think if we get too much in the weeds, I'll sit here and look like I'm out in space because I won't even understand it maybe, but let me bring it down a little bit more to, I just look at this. It's not this simple as I dug into it, before we came on today. It's not just solar the way that so many of us out here just living our lives believe solar is. We see a photo cell or a solar panel and the sun hits that and that goes to an energy grid and it feeds something instead of us having to have a coal power plant or something like that. We're using the sun's energy to power things. It's an easy way of saying it, right?
Because it's the right way to say it. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, but there's different technologies that are evolving more simple than just a basic solar panel sitting out in a field somewhere or up on a roof. And it seems like there's some evolution, and I want to get into that. But I think as we also talk about this entrepreneurship in VC space, how did you choose to fund companies?
Like which ones stood out? Is that what you mean?
Was it Shark Tank like, just behind the scenes?
There's a little bit of that. I think that's a very condensed, fictionalized, or I shouldn't say fictionalized, but, semi-scripted, like they've got a process. But I think those folks are real investors and they focus on the same things that every investor focuses on. And so for me, the number one thing is the team, the founding team. How involved are they? How long have they been working together? That says a lot. And do I think this is a team that can execute on their vision? And so that was always the number one thing. Do I believe in the team? And then, how big is the market? Like, how big is this opportunity really? How difficult is it? Like, what are the barriers to entry into that market? And how well positioned do I think this company is to attack those things? And then I think the last thing for me, because I was investing mostly in climate, although I'd made some investments in like software, digital media. In software and digital media, you can do a lot with very little capital. And that's kind of been proven by the Silicon Valley software VC model. For hard tech and for things in climate, like what we do, some of the steps are quite capital intensive. So that was also always on my mind is, how much more money is this company going to need before it can really go big? And, that sometimes was a yes or no decision point, but sometimes that was, okay, so how much do we as investors need to own of this company in order for it, $100 million of capital later for us to still have an ownership stake that's meaningful. So those are for the most part, the key criteria, and lots of nuance all around the world. But
did you have a spreadsheet like, here's the algorithm?
No.
And you said, hey, check. See, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, I don't think there is, right? Is it, how much is gut instinct? How much of it is, right?
Yeah, I think it's so much. I mean, especially at an early stage, right? Because in early stage, it's to, do you believe? It's so much indexing on the team, and do you believe in the opportunity? Because there isn't, when you get a little further along and companies have product in market, then yeah, absolutely, you can have a spreadsheet on how much revenue are they generating per employee, what are their margins, kind of all kinds of metrics to evaluate the business. But when you're early, it's a lot of belief and a lot of instinct.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering from your space. How much of the adjectives and characteristics matter? The how committed is someone? What level of persistence do they have? Are they all in? Like these things that I just find. Like I recently watched, not to sit here and say who we should look up to as leaders and who we think are the people that are our heroes in life, but I watched a documentary recently, of course on Netflix, about Arnold Schwarzenegger, and there's a lot more to him than I knew. And you see what he did with his life. Again, not pointing out the flaws and the failures, but like the massive accomplishments he had. Like that guy dominated 3 separate, totally different spaces. That maybe you could give him the first one that say, well, he was meant to do it. You know how when you've succeeded in life, you're like, well, they were meant to do that. Well, it's like, guys, hold on. Maybe they had natural talents and instincts, but the second and third thing that he dominated in his life, those weren't natural instincts. He had to learn how to be a politician. He had to learn how to be an action hero. So that's what I'm wondering, what you found in your space. And then how right were you? How often about people? How right were you? How often did you get it right and wrong in the VC world?
That's a good question. I would like to think that about people, I got it right most of the time. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, every company that I invested in has been a success. Certainly not. And I think, super talented entrepreneurs don't always have a win, for factors, some that are in their control and not in their control. So, setting that part aside, I think I've been a relatively good judge of the people. And you mentioned some of the adjectives that are important, like commitment, persistence. How all in are they? Are they too all in? Because I think too all in can be a thing as well.
It can be detrimental.
It can be detrimental.
Yeah.
Because I think when you're too all in, sometimes you're blind to new information coming in, and it makes it challenging to pivot your position or to pivot your strategy. So I like to see that too. I like to see people who, when new data comes in, they rethink instead of being, blinders on, laser focused on what they said they would do.
So what do you think with now you really going all in, I'm assuming the right amount of all in into Ubiquitous Energy. But what about all the things you've learned from the past as you bring that experience with you to help lead this company and what I'm assuming is operate and run the business side of it? How often do you see yourself in your day-to-day management roles, leadership, relying on all the things you learned in the past?
Oh, all the time. All the time.
How?
I mean, that's, I think that is, so I was really worried when I would say I was scared when I came in as CEO, because I'd never operated a company as CEO. I had never really worked at an operating company. So all my prior roles were, as an investment banker at JPMorgan or at Houlihan Lokey in Los Angeles, as an investor at a VC fund, but not, sitting at a desk getting a product made or marketed or, sold. Like I hadn't done that. But I had seen a lot of other people do it. And I think that was a really beautiful thing about both of my prior roles. As an investment banker, I did a lot of sell side M&A where I would be helping entrepreneurs exit their businesses. And so I loved that because I got to learn both about the business, because you got to know it to be able to market it to investors. And you also get to know the entrepreneurs. And likewise, as a VC, I got to really sit with entrepreneurs who are operating their businesses and learn what worked and what didn't work. And so, yeah, now I've been at this for 4 years. And I still am, I talk to entrepreneurs that are still in my VC portfolio, and we talk through what's worked, what doesn't work, what are you seeing? I draw on all those different experiences all day, every day.
Are back in your JPMorgan days and working with the investment bank, that's totally different from being in the VC world, is from my perspective. I'm assuming that the conversations you had back in those investment banker days, I bet you looked at entrepreneurs, and your team and the leadership looked at entrepreneurs differently than in the VC space.
For sure.
Why is that?
Well,
we're entrepreneurs. Aren't we like scary and crazy to investment bankers?
I don't know about that. Maybe a little, maybe a little, because you're sitting in the safety of your big investment bank role as an investment banker, and seeing people who, we keep talking about people being all in, people who really have put all of their dreams and resources into what they're working on. I used to get to meet those folks at a very specific moment in time, typically when they were ready to exit the business. And so I think that gave me that lens of the business was built versus being along for the journey of the build.
Yeah.
And as a VC, I got to be a little bit closer to the journey of the build.
Just because I think
it's a really different perspective now. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm thinking from an investment banker, I'm not as plugged in as you were. I know one or two, but at a lower level. And those people tend to want to see the metrics. They want to see the data. They don't want to listen to my passion and my inspiration and my purpose behind it. They just want to know why I believe that. They don't care that I do. Why do you? And then that's tough to explain sometimes, other than this is just what I feel. I believe in it, right? Where on the VC world, that's what you want. Don't you want? It's wow, okay, I see the opportunity. I see the growth. I see the 10X or the 15X or the 20X in 3 to 5 years. All right, I believe too. You sold me. Let's go. Am I correct in?
Oh yeah, I agree with that completely. And then even that next phase of being the operator and actually having to turn I believe into I can do is a completely different lens. Mm-hmm. I think you're spot on there. Especially early stage VC, like we were saying, it's just when there are no metrics, your investment banker brain just starts to explode.
So operating Ubiquitous today as a CEO, now you're going into the 10th year of the life cycle of the business?
11th. Yeah. We were founded in the end of 2012.
12. Okay.
I met it in 2013, but they've been,
since 12, they've been going. So how do you rate and chart success now?
Ooh, that's a great question. Now we are at the phase where we have a big launch customer here in the US in Anderson Windows. They're terrific. We have a terrific partner for international expansion. One of the biggest energy company in Japan is our investor and partner. So we're already working on expanding into Asia with them. So now for me, the next critical step to success is getting product truly into the market. And, I believe we'll do that we've got some stuff cooking, through a combination of licensing partners, who are manufacturing partners, through joint venture partners with existing folks in the supply chain. But that's our next phase of the business. The product's ready. We've got it installed around the world in pilot format. But the next big step is product in the market and installed in buildings, that customers are paying for. And so for me, that's the next big measure of success is, can we do that? Can we do that at scale? And how quickly can we do that?
Mm-hmm. Do you think the solar, from the outside, I'm going to use terms that you're probably Mark, you're way off. Why are you saying things like that? But the solar business, the solar game, as I see it, I'm is it still early? Is it ready for mass adoption? Is the affordability to consumers? Like, these are questions I'm sure you can answer that I just don't know. I'm like, are you early? Are you a decade early?
No, I think we're right on time. Of course, I think we're right on time. I mean, so the solar industry is so broad. And so I think it is exactly the moment in time for solar to truly take off, broadly. And so I think when most people think about solar, you said this earlier, they think about those big utility scale solar farms out in the Nevada desert, or they think of panels on your roof. And, so for that business, my personal opinion is that what is really going to unlock, rooftop solar in people's homes and, big utility scale solar to make it even bigger is the availability of storage. And because that's right, like that's the complaint about solar, which is very valid, is that, if it's cloudy or it's stormy or night, you're not producing. And so what do you do about that? So having storage on site to smooth out production versus non-production hours and also provide backup power, I think is a huge unlock for the entire industry. Now, for us, we have a little bit of a different approach because we've embedded our solar materials in our first products case in Windows. So that's really exciting because what that allows us to do is to capture the consumer while they're replacing their windows. And you get a double benefit. Typically, when people are replacing their windows, they're doing it for a reason because their old windows are no longer efficient. So we can get people into a super energy efficient window. So they're going to save energy bills, like on your buildings that you were talking about. Windows are critical to energy efficiency, and we can generate electricity. And so that kind of double whammy is I think we're exactly the right moment to be able to do that. People are thinking about on-site solar, right? Like the grid goes down depending on where you live. In the Midwest, I think you guys have a little bit more reliability than we do in California or in Texas.
Probably not as much demand on it. We have the same type of infrastructure, not as much pull and demand as what it seems.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, think about what's happening. The trends are for more electrification, right? Most of us are, looking at EVs, considering them or have bought them. People are switching over to heat pumps from fossil fuel furnaces. As we move toward electrification, we have more demand on the grid, which means electricity prices are going to go up.
Yep.
And grids are going to be less reliable. So the way we can help is by making electricity on site and storing it there and being able to be an active participant in the grid to help take some of that weight off of our utilities.
So you mentioned that you have a big Anderson Windows. That's a huge partner. I mean, that's huge. Me being in the real estate and development side, it's a huge brand in the window and door space, which but it's enormous. And so I'm assuming that when people go to whether it's new construction, some custom builders who are building, $800,000 homes, $1 million homes, $1.5 million, it's probably an upgraded option. I'm assuming now, since you're going to partner with Anderson, that, hey, you can have this line of windows. There's an A line, a B line, a C line, a D line. And then, hey, also, we have this solar line. I'm assuming that's what it is.
That's the vision.
And on a replacement perspective as well. But I'm going to take this down my own personal experience, what I'm doing right now. So I'm rehabbing a historic property right now in the MSA of, it's a weird location we're in, but I'm really in Cincinnati. I'm sitting today physically in Northern Kentucky, but if I go out onto my terrace on the 9th floor of this building, I'm sitting on top of downtown Cincinnati. It's just the Ohio River cuts through. And so, but I'm rehabbing a home that was built in 1920 it's a riverside district. I could walk to the river, and I am replacing all the wood windows. So it's a historic district. So it's going to be an Anderson product or one of those other ones. But also I'm evaluating the roofing situation. And I found myself 2 weeks ago digging in and saying, hey, what's up with this Tesla roof? With these tiles. And then it's like, okay, but then you also have to buy one of the storage pieces, right? So you have to buy one of the cells so that you can store it. And then do you get backup generating all these? And I started calculating the numbers. I really did. And I'm like, all right, this is twice the cost. Like truly for that remodel for just a consumer, like not B2B, but B2C consumer, it's double the cost. And then my business mind, I'm like, all right, let me articulate out how long it's going to take for me to get this payback. It'll probably take 30 years.
To me, Mark, because what kind of payback were you getting from your passive roof?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not like poking at you. I think
it's passionate to you. I like it. This is the conversation to have.
It's an interesting, because we say the same thing about windows. Mm-hmm. And look, the Tesla solar roof, I think that's a super cool product. If you haven't looked at it, also look at GAF Energy. They have a roofing shingle that's, I think, a little easier to install. It's a different approach, but check them out if you're interested in solar roofs. Because I love that product.
But sell me on this, because it's a huge passion of yours. I mean, you're in the space, so sell me why I should spend, because I'm thinking about it. Why I should spend double when it's truly not me, to my direct pocketbook, a direct ROI short term.
Well, look, in the short term, you should take advantage of the incentives coming from the Inflation Reduction Act, because they are meant to help bridge these early technologies that are maybe not at scaled pricing. So I can't not say that. So take advantage of the tax credits, because that's what they're there for. I think it's really a part of looking at the long-term value of that building. And you do have a choice, right? And we'll talk about roofs for a second here, because it's so easy for people to think about. You can put on your typical roof, whatever you're going to put up, composite, shingles, whatever, and then do panels. That's always an option. You may or may not like the way that looks. You may or may not like the difference in lifespan between your roof and your panels, because that might be a little different. But it does give you that option to put the solar on at any point. I think the thing I love about the solar roofs is that they're built right into the roofing. You typically don't see them. So if you are a very aesthetics focused person, you don't have to see solar panels mounted on top of this beautiful roof that you selected to match the building and to look great. You can just make the solar the roof. So I make the aesthetic argument quite a bit, because if that's important to you, there's just really no way to preserve your aesthetics without having something that's a fully integrated product.
So do you think that, make an argument for, what do you think the expense is if you're going to have mass adoption on this ubiquitous energy platform? I'm partnering with Anderson and commercial products, because I looked at, when I acquired the last commercial building I acquired, it's 120,000 square foot building, an office building, close to the city. And when I bought it, I said, hey, it was built in 82. So, if I wanted to reskin it, I evaluated, I looked into it. If I wanted to reskin the building with all glass, it would have been a couple $1 million. It's what it would have been 3 years ago. Now it's about 3, right? What does that look like from a product with your technology in it? What would the extra cost be to try to make art? Because we're business people, and I might even be a limited minded business person. I'm just looking at ROI. My brain's so focused on ROI, and you probably, I wouldn't think you'd disagree with me, from the old VC and the bankers. It's like, hey, what's the profit going to be on this? What's the return going to be on it? Because if you're a for-profit business, you're not out here trying to do this for nonprofit.
Understood. Yeah. And I think you're right. The economics have to work, right? That's the bottom line. Now, there's a whole separate conversation about code and what's, we'll set that aside for a second, because I think in order for our product to be mass adopted, it really does have to be economically viable for everyone. So the beautiful thing for us here is that we just provide the glass. Then, and as you know, when you reskin a building, the glass is only a component to that facade. So we're the glass, and then some, wiring, we call it balance of system, wiring, inverters, kind of what makes a solar system a solar system. The total upcharge for our glass now, once we're in production and this is scaled to a point where it's not the very first piece of glass, it should be about 30% more on that installed facade that you're talking about. We have a path to making that even smaller, but that's a good metric to wrap your head around for, kind of early days. Now, that is captured and offset by the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits. So for early movers between now and 2035, it should be cost neutral. And then you get, effectively a perpetual revenue stream of electrons. also would tell you that if you're telling me your building was built in the 80s, your glass is probably not super energy efficient. So I think you're going to have also a big delta in just your HVAC and energy costs from heating and cooling, just from upgrading that facade. So what gets me excited is, are there folks like you who just look at it from a passive, like, no, I'm not going to spend $3 million just to, reglaze with passive glass. But if there's a revenue stream and a tax credit, maybe that's a catalyst to get someone like you to actually consider reglazing that building. And then we have now more efficient energy or building stock out there. That makes me really happy.
Yeah, because there's a ton of buildings out here, and it's what's happening in the office space, over the past 3 years is a huge change, obviously. And so who knows what's going to happen with that, with conversion from office going to multifamily. There's a lot of evolution happening right now. So that's when I said, hey, are we a decade early? That's what I was saying. Like, is this economically viable for mass adoption?
And yeah, I think it is. And that's part of why we partnered with Andersen. I mean, really, they, they're incredibly efficient at what they do, and they touch so many homes. They're able to bring us to market and our products to market within their product portfolio in a way that is not a substantial price increase for their customer. And so for us, that's key. And so, yeah, we're excited about this. And I think that the key is being a component of a product that is going to be sold anyway. Right? Because the buying decision, you said it earlier, it's not, oh my God, I need to go upgrade my windows because I want a solar system. That's not the buying decision. The buying decision is, I'm buying glass. Do I want it to also produce electricity in addition to giving me all the other benefits I was going to get from that window glass anyway?
Do you think that is Ubiquitous? Is that going to be a brand that consumers know when they go to shop for replacement windows? Or would it just be Andersen is advertising this solar photogenic feature?
Well, I can't speak for Andersen, but I can say that in all of our, kind of early work we've been doing together, we both companies do want to preserve the Ubiquitous Energy brand and make sure that is visible to customers, alongside the Andersen brand and, as a sub, maybe powered by Ubiquitous Energy. But we think that's important. And I think that's something that I'm proud of with our team. I mean, we're a small team and we've, only been at this, like, we said about 11 years. But we do have a brand, and believe it or not, we have an international brand already because we have this very cool technology that people want. And so I think there's already value in the Ubiquitous brand. We don't want to lose that.
What makes you, and I'm going to make you, you're not allowed to be humble in this answer. What makes you, I'm sitting here today and I know, and I'm like, yep, she's a good leader. She's a great operator. She has a ton of great experience. The people that work around her, they probably love her. How do you pull together this idea of being a 2023 CEO to connect? Like, there's people like Richard Branson. There's a huge debate. I mean, that guy's obviously massively successful. And his idea is you got to take care of the employees and they'll take care of customers. And there's other huge companies that say it's all about the customer. I've been in both environments, right? And so what makes you such a capable and special CEO? You can't say I'm still getting better. You can't say I'm going to be a better one next year than I am today. We know those things are coming, right? But what do you think the characteristics and the features are that make you and other people just great leaders and CEOs in 2023?
Well, I happen to be in the Richard Branson camp. And I mean, I think, different people have different things that work for them. So this, my leadership style is, I think, pretty uniquely mine, and it works for me. I think it is that I truly and sincerely care about our team, about our partners, about our customers. And that leads to building an organization that has a lot of trust and respect, within team members, a lot of honest communication, honest and open communication that is also, for the most part, kind. We really strive to be kind and not, some people say honest communication and they mean, blunt and just saying whatever you think without filter. And, that's not us either. So I think really caring not just about outcomes, but about people, and making sure that we set our team up for maximum success and being able to really draw out whatever sparks that individual on our team's brilliance. That's important to me. And I think that then flows into, how do we interact with our partners? How do we interact with our customers? Do we show up and do what we say we're going to do every day? And do we act with integrity? And by that, I mean, do we present ourselves in a way that is consistent across the team and with our actions? And so all of those things are important to me. And I really do think the root of it is actually caring about the people and not just doing the things that make people think you care, but actually caring.
Did that evolve? Did that sense of what your responsibility as a leader is and how you lead, did that evolve? Like if you go back 15 years on who the Susan was 15 years ago and who she was 10 years ago, is this an evolution or has this always been there?
I think it's always been there, because I think, some of it is just inherent in kind of who you are and how you approach the world. But I think for me, the evolution was bringing that into a leadership role. And how to do that in a way that still maintains, I don't think authority is necessarily the right word, but how can you be a caring individual and still be results oriented and, not just be mush? I mean, anyone who knows me knows I'm certainly not mush. But, really being able to be your authentic self, I think that comes with experience and just time in the world and being able to, walk your own walk. And that was certainly an evolution for me.
When you say you're not mush, does that coincide with you also being athletic and being an athlete and all that? Does that coincide? Because you're like, I can't be mush when I'm out there.
Probably. You definitely can't be mush when you're out there. Probably.
How do you mold the two though, and find and where you're able to be, empathetic or sympathetic? We combine those words today because, like, I think the challenge can be as a leader, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have any problem, having people oppose my perspective, but today you find yourself as a leader and you're like, I've already learned that. Like if you're dealing with people and their challenges and you have the answer and you know what to do and you just wish that you had that shot to give them. And how in that moment though, can you be sympathetic if you haven't ever experienced it or gone through it, but then truly have empathy for what they're going through while they're going through it? How do you bring those two together?
I think for me, it's really questioning myself and asking myself, do I really know? And really challenging that. I think I know, but listening and being open to other perspectives. I know I still might end up in the same place where I'm like, yeah, I knew, but really challenging that myself and sitting with that, I think has been for me really critical. And we have something we talk about at Ubiquitous called the knower trap, which is you can get stuck in the knower trap where you're not listening because you know. And just being able to identify that and challenge yourself, I think is one of the keys to being a successful leader and to being able to get the best out of people and get their best ideas. Because if you know, they're not going to tell you their best ideas. Yeah.
I think that's definitely a leadership trap, right? That we can fall into. Because whatever's gotten us here, whatever drove us to the point that we're at, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of willpower, a lot of determination, a lot of overcoming. People tell you can't do something, you do it anyway, and you're all in and you figure things out and you problem solve. And so there's probably something there where we feel like we can go find the answer, where you don't have to wait and rely on others. Well, there's a lot of other opinions that are probably better than ours at times. What's your thought about, I think it's fascinating, and I said that in the beginning, you come from the VC and finance world. As segments are looked at in 3 to 5 to 7 years, from my understanding in that world, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
You're right.
How do you combine that with everything that I've learned in my personal life and in business? It's like, man, you got to be all in and you got to be all in long term. How do you connect those and figure out like which one of them can we evaluate and determine how successful we are? How do we do that?
I mean, it's really hard. I mean, the first bit, you said it, is there a mismatch between my time frame as an entrepreneur and our team's time frame as we build the business and the time frame of our investors? I mean, that's a great starting place. Some of that's in investor selection. Some of it's in communication across the two parties. And I think a lot of it is in, the second part of what you said, which is setting milestones that are maybe our interim milestones to us as we look at that long-term play, but that are signals of success and, kind of building into this. I think of it as a step function of different phases of businesses. Mm-hmm. Especially for a company like ours, if you think in a 3 or 5 year time frame, it's incredibly difficult to go from technology to, broad adoption of a hard goods product, especially one that's built into buildings, in any time frame that's 3, 5, or 7 years. And so, some of it is charting that path that has different milestones and steps along the way that we can clearly articulate to investors so that we can say, this is what we're going to do with your money. It's going to build value at the company and it will unlock the next phase. And so, a lot of our strategic planning and kind of, I've been trained to think that way into those, those step phases of, what's success in this phase and what does that mean the next phase looks like. So it does become like very much a stair step all along the way to that long-term goal.
What have you learned about what we should do with goals for us? Let's say that I personally have a 3-year goal and I see it 6 months, I see it 12 months, I see it 18 months, and I'm looking at the metrics and I'm like, hey, are we on track? Do I think we're on track to achieve it? When I get to 24 months or 30 months and I'm like, wow, we're really not going to hit that 36-month target. What should an entrepreneur, no matter if you're early stage or, a CEO who's come in, what do you do? What do we do with that goal? What do we do with goal? Is that okay? Do we reset another goal? Do we reflect and look back and figure out what needs to improve going forward? Like, how do we do that for ourselves? Not for investors, not for anybody else, to make sure that we're actually involved in something that's productive, that we're living up to the expectations of our stakeholders, the people that are relying on us. Because they don't know. They're on board. They got on board the ship with us, right? They're just having faith. Like, man, they've got it pointed in the right direction. The outcome's going to be proper for us. What do we do when we realize, man, we're not going to hit this?
Well, and sometimes I heard you say it too, we have to evaluate that goal for ourselves too, right? Like we all have personal goals. I mean, I think the thing that I'm constantly doing, and I'm guessing you are too, is I'm constantly evaluating that goal because the world changes so quickly and so much new information is coming in that 3 years is a long time to have one goal. I mean, I'm sure you have an array of goals, but to not reevaluate and potentially reset that goal. You're talking about a scenario where you might not make it. I mean, there are probably just as many scenarios where you've overshot that goal already at 24 months and it was the wrong goal. So I think of goals as, things that are certainly, set and we're trying to achieve them, but I think they need to be constantly reevaluated and we're always getting new information. And so that's something I do for myself personally, kind of constant check-ins on, I said I wanted to be here. Do I still want to be there? And is it still achievable? Is it even what I want? And that's really important, that constant reevaluation. And we do that at Ubiquitous with our goals too. I mean, the world has changed so much in the last 18 months. Man. Right? Like the economy is completely different. So we'd be crazy to have exactly the same goals. I challenge you to find someone who hasn't reevaluated their goals in that environment.
Yeah. Do you have it figured out now? Like, can you be that honest on a podcast? Like, I find myself weekly, I'm like, what metric am I supposed to be looking at in the world right now to even evaluate what's proper here? It's wild.
It's wild.
I know. And so it does. And it doesn't matter if we listen to the experts who we would look at as government entities. it's wild. And what I've found is, man, our projections and the so-called experts, we're just wrong all the time. And a lot of times there's economists that I listen to, and I would always plug into them every year. And I'm like, man, they're spot on. These people are always spot on. They always can see, they're looking back at trends. They're looking at decade trends. And I even listened to somebody like Ray Dalio, right? Ran one of the most successful, if not the largest hedge funds in the world, wrote the book Principles, which is an awesome book. He talks about idea meritocracy. He's so right about so many things. But then I'm like, if I listen to this guy, he says we're in like quarter 3.5 of 4 quarters of like the end of our country. I mean, I'm not kidding. I listened to a podcast the other day, like Tom Bilyeu has Impact Theory. It's a great podcast. And he was interviewing Dalio. And at the end of it, I'm like, man, I'm depressed. This is one of the most intelligent financial minds that I believe, success and failure. And I'm like, he thinks it's over. I'm like, what are we doing here? And then, but I'm an optimistic entrepreneur. I'm an optimistic human being. And so then what do I do with that? What moves? Where do I go to find the information to know what moves to make as a leader, as an entrepreneur? What do you do with financing? What are growth goals, right? What can you lay out as expectations about leadership? It's wild. It's a tough world, and I don't care. People can shoot me down for it, but it's really tough from my seat. Maybe I need to grow my intelligence. I don't know. It's tough.
No, I agree with you. And what does that even mean, right? Yeah, maybe he's right that, it's over, but what does that mean? I mean, it means the beginning of something else.
And I'm trying to figure out what it is.
Yep. We're all trying to figure out what it is. So I guess I'm like you. I'm such an optimist. Mm-hmm. And I think, I'm so focused on climate. So I see everything through this climate lens. Yes, there's chaos in the markets. And everything that you said, I agree with. Mm-hmm. And there's this just collective movement, at least within climate tech, where I see companies and entrepreneurs working together. We have shared goals. We kind of do feel like we're all, in battle together. And so that gives me some confidence that, it's people like you and me who get to decide what, if this, what we're in right now is ending, we get to be a part of what's beginning, and we get to shape that. And I don't know what that means yet, because I don't think I've quite seen that inflection point, but that's where my optimistic brain goes is, humans, we are so adaptable. And when we work together, we can accomplish really amazing things. And so the end of one phase is going to be the beginning of another one. And I want to be a part of shaping that.
Did you do your undergrad at Yale?
I did. Yes.
Okay. And then you got an MBA at Georgetown, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did the Susan back then, is this a manifestation of what that Susan was designing for her life? Mm-hmm. Or was it a compound effect of just different moves, different decisions, different goals, different mindsets? What is it like when you look back, as if we can talk to that 20-year-old person growing up, the 26-year-old, the 28-year-old, did you know?
No, definitely compound effect of just a variety of experiences and opportunities. Look, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was in college. No idea. And the things I thought I wanted to do were just steps along the way. And so I'm fascinated by people who have that all mapped out. Like my college roommate she wanted to be a physician, probably since the day she was born. She went to Yale. She went straight into medical school. She went straight into practice. She's incredibly successful. And I'm fascinated, but don't understand that. I never had that. But I've always loved new experiences, and I love changes, and I've loved learning. And here I am. And I think everything was leading me here, to this type of role and to get to be part of this climate movement. It's so exciting, but I couldn't have identified that, back in the day. No way.
So you said you loved learning. Where'd that come from? Because everything we've talked about today, there's a couple characteristics that I consistently hear from successful people. Like you talked about your friend. She's a successful physician in some sort. Don't know if she's in a specialty or not, but she's successful. Doesn't mean she's an entrepreneur, but she's successful. There's these things about curiosity, about a desire to learn and grow. There's these things that are just these shared. It's a silver lining in success of everyone. Where'd that come from?
I think so too, by the way. I think curiosity is like the critical success factor.
Yeah.
I think for me, it comes just from, family upbringing, the way that I was raised. And both of my parents are very, very curious people. They're both readers. In my house, when I was growing up, everybody had their nose in a book. I'm old enough that when we would have arguments as kids at the dinner table, I'm one of three. So I have an older brother and a younger brother. So we would be talking at the dinner table and we'd have an argument about fact. My dad would say, well, somebody go get the encyclopedia. That's how old I am. We had encyclopedias, and, one of us would run upstairs and get the encyclopedia. And, there in real time, we would get the answer. And that's completely how I was raised. And I'll give you another example. My mom just turned 80 and she's constantly learning. And if you ask her what is, the most interesting thing that she did over the last month, she'll tell you about, a new book that she read and what she learned. And she's very involved in, politics that work for her. And so I think it really does, come, at least for me, from family. And both my brothers are the same way. They're just constant learners. It's like we have hungry brains, I think.
So you've been, what I found too, which is funny, you're competitive. There's no doubt.
I am super competitive. Even though sometimes I don't want to be, I can't help myself.
I know. I think your natural instinct is you maybe would prefer like, hey, that's not important. I shouldn't be that way. You naturally are. But what's funny is, as I hear about that moment of sitting around a dinner table and you and your brothers having the debate and your dad saying, get the encyclopedia, that's a competitiveness too. That's being designed to learn and to be right and to grow your brain. Because when you were little kids, you didn't like to be wrong. That's no different than we didn't like to be wrong. You wanted to win. And I bet there were games. I bet there was constant challenging of, like you said, educational experience, opportunity of conversation. So this competitiveness that a lot of successful people that are leading others and helping them grow and evolve and leading businesses, there's a competitive characteristic to all of this. And it can be good. It's not bad. It can be a very good thing. Because competitive, I think it makes us want to be better. It makes us want to do it well. It doesn't have to be better than the other person or the other business. Let me be better than I was yesterday. Let me make sure that my mind's a little bit more evolved tomorrow based on the things I've learned today. And that's probably that desire to learn, the curiosity. So, and I think it's way more simple. What I found is it's way more simple than people think it is. You can take my little Midwestern brain and understand some of these things. It's not as good as your Northeastern educated brain, but the same things can happen.
The same things can happen.
Yeah.
And the West Coast brains too. We got all these different competitive ways to be competitive.
What do you think? What's the evolution of? I don't want to put a certain time frame. What's the evolution of Ubiquitous and the energy company that you have all this passion around, that you're leading as CEO? Because you still do other things. Like if people go out and check out your LinkedIn profile, you're on boards. You're still in the VC world. There's multiple things you're doing. But this is like you're all in. Yeah, you got money behind it. You're the CEO. You're passionate about. This is the thing. It seems like you want to see like get to the finish line and win.
That's right. It is.
Yeah.
I want to succeed with this company. For not surprising reasons. I mean, I think I said this before. I think we have an opportunity to make an enormous impact, and I want to make that happen. I want to be part of the team that makes that happen. And so, yes, I'm all in on this. You mentioned that I'm on other boards. I think I am on other boards for companies that I've invested in. So I'm not making new VC investments for the most part. That I don't have the brain power to do that and operate a company, but I am still very involved in a couple of the companies that I've invested in. And that, kind of like pattern matching and, being able to cross-pollinate ideas across industries and across companies is incredibly valuable for me, both as a board member at those companies and at Ubiquitous. And then, the other thing that I spend a lot of my time on and is really a lot of what inspires me in my personal life is I'm on a nonprofit board, something called the High Fives Nonprofit Foundation. And we work with we say athletes. I'll come back to why we say athletes, but we work with folks who've had spinal cord injuries, and now we've expanded out to, life-altering injuries. We serve a lot of military veterans who are amputees or who have, PTSD and other impacts from their service. And we work with as many folks as we possibly can who have had life-altering injuries. And we say we provide human care, which is a lot of it is getting people back into sport, getting people back outside, and being able to do things, to your point about being competitive, that make them feel like they're able, because they are. And so that's something, those are athletes. Everybody's an athlete in our world because we like that terminology and because it really is the spirit of the group that we serve. But those folks are just so inspirational to me. And it's incredible when you kind of release this boundary of feeling disabled and, get people back out into sport and back out into doing things they love. It's incredible. And it's incredible what they can achieve.
It's incredible what mindset and our minds can do. It's fascinating. Where did this sense of responsibility to give back? Can I ask that question? Like, is there a purpose? Was there a connection to that nonprofit?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I live in the mountains. I told you that before. I live in the mountains. My husband is a professional ski patroller. I was a professional ski patroller for a few years. That's how we met. And, a natural side effect of being competitive in outdoor sports is injury. I mean, it just is, right? It's challenging to find somebody who's a lifelong skier or a mountain biker or, kite surfer or, pick your sport, who hasn't been injured. And that's a population, especially with spinal cord injuries, that, your life changes like that. And so I saw that happen on the Hill. My husband sees it happen on the Hill all the time. And as ski patrollers, we would just, put them in the ambulance or off in the helicopter and then just hope we would get an update. But their life changed. And so this nonprofit is based in Truckee. So, I knew about it and it's actually interesting. I met our founder because I had been running my mouth talking to another person about high fives. And I had said, I'm not that into high fives because I had a perception that it was only for professional athletes who had been injured, which was not the case. It's just that our founder was a former professional skier. And so he is so incredible that he called me up, didn't know me, invited me to coffee because he's like, I want to set this straight. That's not who we are. And I don't like that that's our perception. And I want you to help me really, truly tell our story and help me help people understand what we really do, because we serve this giant population and we want to serve a bigger population. So yeah, me like running my mouth in town was kind of how I got involved.
So what's the moral of the story? Don't run our mouth, or actually do, because good things can happen.
Well, at least just be honest. I mean, I was being honest, but then own it, right? Don't hide from it. If you say
that's the best. When you get called out on something and you own it, there's great things that come from it. Because if you don't take yourself too serious, you're like, yeah, you're right. You actually get a friend. That's what happens. You make a friend.
That's exactly what
that's
happens.
what we're looking for.
I mean, this is a lifelong friendship and partnership now. So
yeah, and go and try to make differences in people's lives. So what is do you look to anybody, like, is there I just tend to talk to a lot of people who have written books. I haven't written a book yet. It just seems so big to me. One day I will. I'll get over myself and just sit down one day and write the book. But is there a person, a mentor, a book? Is there something you consistently go back to in life? You're like, hey, I really learned a lot from that person, that thing. Is there one? Doesn't have to be. Like, I don't have just one, but do you have one? Do you have a person?
I'm like you. I don't have just one. It's so situational. So it's more like a collection of bits and pieces and things that people have said or done that have inspired me, or, lessons from individuals. And I've always been like that. I don't know about you, but like, I was not one of those kids that hero worshipped bands or actors, or, that never resonated with my brain. And so a lot of these, some of it is, folks who have written things or I've seen interviewed or just seen their success. But some of it is just people in my lives who are doing their thing, and I admire what they're doing. And so, some of those folks are like CEOs in my portfolio that I spend a lot of time with that inspire me and I learn from, parents, kids. I was just on a family vacation with my 16-year-old niece who is incredible, and I learned from her. I'm like a parasite. I feel like I'm just like trying to suck in everybody's brilliance and learn from it.
Well, it's time that you give all that out now, because there's a lot of brilliance and good stuff here too. I'm excited to watch the business. We could sit and have this conversation all day, but you're busy. You have CEO things to do, right? We all have stuff to get to, but I think is there anything else about the solar piece and the integration in? Because when I watched the YouTube video that you all put out, a marketing piece, it's like, wow, okay, that's like, to me, that was like a scientific explanation of what the solar piece of Ubiquitous is. And it's like, wow, you're integrating these pieces to put into these normal surfaces that every day we're touching and we're feeling, and you're drawing out the energy that naturally hits those things. And I was like, okay, this makes sense. Like, how close are we to this adoption? Are these the ones? Are you going to be a company in the space that really crushes this? What is it? So is it more complicated than I understand what we've talked about today? Like, are we here? Are we ready to go? Like, anything else about solar that you need to impart in my brain that everybody else is going to be more intelligent about? They're like, Jesus, Mark, just understand what she's saying.
Well, I'm going to break it down into two different things. One is just ubiquitous, and what are we doing with transparent solar? And you nailed it. I mean, that's our vision, is to allow any surface that sees the sun to make power. So we're starting with Windows. I could coach your iPhone if we were working with Apple, and then you could have emergency power just by putting your phone out in the sun. Cars, greenhouses. I mean, there's no reason that we shouldn't be harvesting all these photons that are hitting us every day. And the way that we do it is really simple. We like to say it's simple, but not easy. You nailed it. Your explanation was perfect. And the way we do it is we have an incredible materials team that invents new materials that, new molecules that allow us to do that. Otherwise, it's pretty simple. And yes, we're going to be the ones that crush it, because as far as I know, there are plenty of other people working on this. We've got the solution. It looks amazing. It is truly transparent and crystal clear, and it's manufacturable, right? Because that's the key. If you can't make it, certainly not at scale, there's no path to mass adoption. For solar overall, I want to invite people to think completely different about energy. We started talking about the grid earlier in the conversation, and the grid is really an incredible accomplishment for humanity, right? You build a new house or a new building, you call the utility, they have, maybe you need a new transformer box, but they basically, like, you have a little offshoot, and the wire comes to your house, and there comes energy. That cannot be the solo way that we get electricity in the future. And so I want people to think about, how am I and how is my household going to participate in electricity generation and electricity efficiency, so that we can still have this seamless access to energy for all of the things that we need it for. And so, some of it is things like rooftop solars, Tesla solar roofs, GAF roofs. Don't forget to look that one up.
Yeah, I have the note.
Ubiquitous windows. Some of it's getting it built into your home, but some of it is thinking like, can my device power itself? And so those are some of the interesting things we're working on, with our friends at Anderson for homes. Can my sliding glass door open and close itself just with solar power and not have to touch the grid? That's a whole new evolution also, is like, what can you do without the grid and be, kind of have autonomous power via solar panels and batteries. And so that's, for me, an exciting frontier, is just to think completely different about energy.
Isn't that the tough thing, though? Asking us, this is a great conversation even for me. I'm sitting here processing things. I have been for the whole time we're talking. Like, it's tough to have us humans think different.
It is.
It's really challenging.
And that's why I want to embed this in products that makes sense and where you don't have to do that much differently, right?
Yeah.
I think EVs are a great example there. If EVs were something entirely different where you had, look, most EVs outperform their internal combustion, brothers and sisters and cousins. And I think that's necessary for adoption, right? You can't ask for compromise.
Yep. It is. So the product has to be 100%. It's like the product's got to be there.
It's got to be there, and it's got to be as good or better.
Yep.
Otherwise, people aren't going to change behavior. And so that's infused in how we think about integrating our technology into products. And so our windows, and that's part of why we partner with Andersen, they're the best. And so we want our technology to be in the best windows, and they can't be a compromise. It can't be a little bit hazy or, a little less thermally efficient for your building. It has to be the best and produce electricity. And that's one of our guiding principles.
So a little bit of a leading question, as I'm sitting here, the curiosity kicked off and I said, okay, let me think about how maybe even I used to think about solar in the business person. So right now, why do you think we're so scared and worried about AI? The average person. Why do you think that is? I have my opinion, but I'm asking Susan. And you could say we're not scared of it. No,
I think
they're trying to drive us that we should be scared of it. So why do you think we're scared of it?
I think it's so unknown and difficult to understand. I think that's the unknown, I think, is the core to most fears. And so that's what I think is driving that AI fear.
Right. And so maybe that's the same thing with solar. But here's what I think about as AI. Everywhere I listen to the so-called experts, and I listened to a guy last night, he said, hey, the reality is now when I go into a manufacturing facility where that used to be 15,000 employees, now there's 10,000 employees. And 5,000 employees have been replaced with automation. And so he said, listen, I don't know if we're a decade, if we're 2 decades or 3 decades away, but there's a strong chance that everyone's going to be replaced with automation. And I start thinking about, I'm like, where are the humans still? Where are they still integrated? Now, when I'm thinking about AI, I think about our content team. Now, what we're able to do with a 3-person content team, just 3 or 4 years ago, that was a 15-person team.
Oh, wow.
And so I look at that as from a productivity and efficiency standpoint. If we can figure out the income, we can figure out the revenue and taxes. If we can figure that out as a country, then it could be very, very positive because it could allow us to take 10 humans and put your energies and efforts somewhere else. And we can even be a better society. But that's really scary to people that are like, what about my job? And so I think about solar. I'm like, solar's scary to people because those people are like, well, this isn't how we've done it. And they just get political about it. They get crazy about it. But to me, it makes all the sense in the world. I don't know the economics behind it, but I'm like, hey, there's this thing shining down that doesn't cost us any money. That doesn't. How do we capture that and use it? It seems very simple, but then there's all these other things that come in. So hopefully that we can understand this. It's way more simple. And then you and all the other people on the back end from the tech piece, we can figure out how to do that in an economical way. So that then to us average brains out here in the world, like, oh yeah, it's just competitive in price. Oh, great. It helps the economy. It's great for natural resources. Oh, great. Let's do this. That's how I'm hopeful that you and your business and other people in your space can make it that simple for us.
Me too. And I think I always like to add this resilience piece, because I feel like part of just like the American persona is this rugged individualism, and we take care of ourselves and our communities. And I think solar and other renewable energy generation can be a big part of that independence and ability to effectively power your life without being so reliant on the grid or the government or on other people. And so I think that's becoming a bigger and bigger part of the messaging is, if you put solar on that home that you're renovating and the grid goes down and your batteries kick in, you're going to be very happy.
That's my whole mindset. Without talking on a podcast or anything, with no one else being involved, my own curious conversation, that's exactly why I would do it.
You're not alone.
And you can't, if you can afford to, if you can afford to do it, you do it. Because it's like, hey, it's like buying insurance, and it's some of the best insurance you can buy.
Yeah.
And so,
I'll tell you, I live in a pretty rural area.
Yep.
Grid goes down from time to time, and we have a 8 kilowatt solar system with 2 Tesla power walls. So we've got storage and all that good stuff. And a few months ago, one of our neighbors texted my husband to say, like, is power out? My husband was like, I don't know. Let me check, because we got batteries. So we don't know. And we have a well. So we need the well. We need the well pump to keep working. Otherwise, we don't know power, no water. So that feeling of independence, it feels pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What have I missed today? So we can let you go and do your CEO things. This is an awesome conversation.
I don't think of anything. Same.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for taking your time, because this, it'll kick off a few other things for me and just makes me a little bit more intelligent around this subject when I talk to people. So, and hopefully we'll be on the lookout for this option when people go to find some replacement windows, when some of the people I'm around in the commercial real estate space, where you just start having the conversation more like, hey, is this thing an option?
I love it. Well, we're coming. So I love it. Get the market ready for us, because we're ready.
See, I love that, Entre. See, there's the competitiveness. Yeah. That's why you guys are going to win, because you and your people. That's awesome. Well, hey, thanks for the time. And, man, I'm going to watch you guys. I'm going to follow one. I'm going to watch it. And maybe one day somebody sells me on that Anderson window product.
Oh, I can't wait for the day. It's coming.
All right, awesome.